Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of No Paint, No Gains. I'm Ray. In this episode, I want to focus specifically on the Legion of Blood for the SOULBLIGHT GRAVELORDS faction in Warhammer Age of Sigmar. Now, I did a previous video where I discussed the army in general and some of the traits, qualities, what I thought made the army good and what I thought made the army bad. I also gave a little bit of insight on what to buy for the army and what I think would be some good purchase points and where to start. And I mentioned that I wanted to do some videos where I would focus on the specific bloodlines. So here I am, right, following through with that. And I'm going to start off with one of my favorite bloodlines, and that's going to be Neferata's bloodline, the Legion of Blood. So in a similar fashion, I'll go over my opinions on what I think are some of the strengths, weaknesses. I'll go over battle traits, commands, artifacts of the bloodline. I'll talk about some of the key units that I think could be included or are mostly included in any competitive list. Other units that I personally really like and I think are pretty good. They work in the bloodline. We'll look at some lists that I've played in the past or messed around with, and then we'll also then take a quick look at a shopping or attempt to look at what could be a good shopping starting point if you're looking to start a Legion of Blood list. So without further ado, let's discuss strengths and weaknesses. And again, this is my personal take. I'm sure everybody has their own opinions on this. So if you disagree or agree, please feel free to leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. But starting off with some of these strengths for the Legion of Blood. So Legion of Blood, in my opinion, has very powerful battle traits, command abilities, and artifacts. So when we go through all of these, you'll see that I'll point out some of them that are really stand out from the other ones. Some of them that are just absolutely a little broken in a way, but nonetheless are very, very good. I know other bloodlines like Virkos has amazing artifacts, right? You have the banner or whatever it's called, Wolfling Cannery Phylactery, I think, and it gives you like a 12-inch 5-up ward. So that's obviously really good, but I just think in combination with the battle traits and the command abilities and the artifacts, it makes Legion of Blood really, really strong. Another thing that we have in Legion of Blood is a little bit of tactical flexibility. And that comes mostly in the form of being able to do a shift or sort of a redeploy in your hero phase when you're setting up your army, thanks to Nefi's built-in sort of Mortarch of Blood ability. It's going to allow you to pick up her and 3 other units, sort of shift them around. They are pretty resilient, and this resilience comes mostly from a combination of an artifact and Neferata's innate spell Dark Mist, and we'll cover that in more detail. And then this is just a strength for SOULBLIGHT, very versatile unit options. So for really competitive lists, if you're trying to make a kind of like an impact in a local tournament or in a GT, you're kind of cemented on taking Nefi and then possibly a Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon or a Vangorian Lord or 2 Vampire Lord Dragons, and those units are sort of staple core units in the army, so they don't really shift. But besides that, you can build freely around them and then support them in any other way that you see fit, or sort of fill in your list with a lot of versatility. But it's not like one consistent, the same units every single time on a list. So you do have the opportunity to sort of play around and experience a little bit different gameplay in that sense. Now, weaknesses, again, just specific weaknesses to SOULBLIGHT in general, in my opinion. So the whole army has a very large reliance on heroes. Legion of Blood is no exception, right? So you're very reliant on your heroes, specifically, your vampire heroes. There is a higher point cost for the army, so I wouldn't say it's necessarily an elite army, but you are going to be spending, about 900 points, more or less, almost 1,000 points, on just 2 to 3 heroes alone. And that just comes in the form of Nefi and the Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragons and their point cost if you do decide to bring them along. Then we have vulnerable to mortal wounds. Your large heroes, Nefi and your Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon, which again, big staples in the army, are going to be vulnerable to mortal wounds and also to shooting and power projection. They do not do very well against units to sort of keep them at bay and whittle them down from afar. They really want to get up close and personal so they can benefit from their high defense and the ability to regenerate using the hunger. If you're able to get the Vampire Lord, Zombie Dragon, or Nefi into combat, they're going to stick around for quite a while. as long as you're able to sort of support them properly and they're not getting attacked by many things all in the same phase, they're going to heal and they're going to sort of shrug off a lot of the attacks because they have a pretty decent save on a 3-up. Okay, next I want to talk about battle traits. Legion of Blood has 2 battle traits. We'll start with Unparalleled Expertise. So, Friend Legion of Blood Vampire Heroes. This is only affecting your vampire heroes. So when a vampire hero is within 3 inches of an enemy unit, they're going to gain +1 to melee weapons used by that unit. That is really, really good because it doesn't specify that it only works on the melee weapons of the hero, meaning that it can apply to the mount attacks as well. Now, if you are outside of 3 inches of the enemy unit, you gain +1 to casting, dispelling, and unbinding rolls. Also really, really good, especially for your vampire lord on foot, who more than likely is going to be, for the majority of the fight, outside of 3 inches, right? Playing a support role, trying to buff up summonable units around it, contesting side objectives, and then casting either Hoarfrost or Blizzard or Spirit Gale in some case if you're still, bringing Spirit Gale with you. It's going to allow you to have a little bit of extra bonus with that +1 to casting, dispelling, and unbinding. Now, the Coven of Nulamia is your second battle trait. And then for this one says, Friendly Legion of Blood Vampire Hero can choose one of the following heroic actions. So instead of choosing one of the 4 standard heroic actions, you can go ahead and choose one of these 2. The first one is called Premeditated Bloodshed. Until the end of this turn, ward rolls cannot be made for wounds and mortal wounds caused by attacks made by this hero. This is absolutely one of my favorite command abilities to utilize, especially if I get a good charge off on my Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon. I'll even use it on Nephi a lot of the times if I'm just trying to, bypass pesky wards, like a 5-up ward from like Nurgle or something like that, just to make sure I start dealing some good damage on a key unit and healing Nephi back up at the same time. A lot of times people, you'll tell them like, hey, I have heroic action that can bypass wards, and like, oh, okay, yeah, that's cool, and they don't really realize what that means when they go to make their ward saves. They're like, oh, I have a 5-up ward, and you're like, no, you don't, because I use that heroic action, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, wait. So that can really catch them off guard, even if you've told them at the beginning or if you sort of warned them about it. So something that's really, really good, especially with all the wards in the game right now, kind of just bypass that extra save from your enemy. The next one is going to be Immortal Majesty. So until the end of this turn, your opponent must use 2 command points instead of 1 to issue the All-Out Defense and Inspiring Presence command to enemy units within 12 inches of that hero. Now, I think that one is really, really good, especially if you're pairing it with a command ability like Doomed Minions, right? Where you're sort of, adding a little extra damage to their battle line or their infantry, hitting on 2s and things like that, where now you're making it even more difficult for them to, avoid making bravery checks. Another thing to note is this, right? It says units within 12 inches, not necessarily wholly within 12 inches. So kind of just combo that with the large base size of the Vampire Lord, Zombie Dragon, and a Nephi, and that really adds a lot of power to that ability. Okay, next I want to talk about command traits, and there's 3 command traits for us to look at. First one being Doomed Minions. This one says, after deployment, but before the first battle round begins, you can pick up to D3 enemy units that are not heroes or monsters. Attacks made with melee weapons that target that unit score a hit on an unmodified roll of 2+, while that unit is within 3 inches of this general. So this is basically going to work on your melee profile weapons on only the hero and not the mount. So a really important thing here, right? This is one of the core rules of the game. It says command traits cannot, as of now, right, influence mounts and mount attacks unless stated otherwise. So generally we take Doom Minions on a Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon. So when you charge in, right, all the attacks that you make with your Death Lance on a Doomed Minions unit that you've designated is going to be hitting on an unmodified 2+. This does not apply to the attacks of the dragon. It's really important for you to know this. A lot of new players, will sort of forget this, and they'll start rolling, 2-ups on the dragon claw and maw attacks. So it's something for you to sort of point out to them, hey, that doesn't work like that, and help them out and explain why. But nonetheless, it's really, really strong because anything else attacking that unit, as long as it's within 3 inches of that general, right, is going to benefit from that 2+ hit roll. So really, really strong, especially if you're trying to clear out, you know, massive waves of infantry or like easy screens, right? Just sort of cut through them so you can get to your designated target unit that you're really trying to get to. Okay, the next one is Game Hunter. So after deployment, but before the first battle round begins, you can pick one enemy monster that is not a hero. The attack characteristics of that unit's melee weapons is 1, while that unit is within 3 inches of this general. It's kind of a niche pick, in my opinion. Game Hunter can be really, really good if you're going up against, you know, your buddy who you know plays Gargants all the time, and you show up and just laugh as, you know, you rush your general into that line and be like, hey, by the way, you only have 1 attack with your Mega Gargants, you know, as long as they're within 3 inches, and they're going to have to get within 3 inches to really do anything. Besides that, it's not necessarily one that you would normally take very often. Generally, it might just be your last pick, unless you really know you're playing, you know, and your local meta has a lot of monsters. Actually, I don't even think it works for Gargants, yeah, because a lot of Gargants are heroes, so even then, it's total nonsense. So yeah, you know, something to keep in mind there. Tailored Downfall. So after the deployment, but before the first battle round begins, you can pick one enemy hero on the battlefield. The strike last effect applies to that unit while it's within 3 inches of this general. Again, a little niche in its selection, a little specific. It has definitely a little more use than Game Hunter, because now, you know, you have a little bit of pick at the beginning of the game, like, hey, I know, you know, I want to target this guy. Let's say, for example, like a Kragnos or something, right? And then now strike last applies to it, so you can potentially try to get it out of the game before it, you know, comes back and claps back at you. But if I had to rate them and if I had to pick, I'd sort of pick this one system here where I give Doom Minions first choice, Tailored Downfall second, and then I'd pick Doom Minions again, and then Game Hunter. Don't really see the use for Game Hunter. Kind of feels like they could have done something better with that. Just wasted, in my opinion. Okay, next, the Artifacts of Power. And again, we have 3 to choose from, starting with the Amulet of Screams. So roll a dice for each time an enemy unit within 18 inches of the bearer successfully casts a spell that is not unbound. On a 3+, that unit suffers D3 mortal wounds after the effect of that spell has been resolved. Can be really, really powerful in the current meta, especially with all these spell casting that is being used, with all the primal dice. Okay, makes your opponent think twice possibly about casting certain spells or trying to summon certain endless spells. Just because they're little foot wizards who are generally the one doing this, you know, they have what, 5-6 wounds. They're gonna start suffering D3 for every spell that they successfully cast. And let's be honest, they're probably gonna get that cast off with all the primal dice and bonuses that a lot of armies have. So puts a little bit of fear in their mind as they try to, you know, get all that magic and power projection off. So I think that's a pretty decent artifact. Definitely has some play depending on your local meta. Next is the Orb of Enchantment. Once per battle at the start of the combat phase, you can pick one enemy hero within 3 inches of that bearer and roll a dice. On a 3+, that hero cannot be picked to fight in that phase. I don't know, this is a hot take, but for me personally, I am not a fan of any once per battle artifacts. I like things that can get multiple use in the long run. A lot of games, especially for Soulblight, tend to run later, you know, turn 4, possibly even turn 5. So unless it's something super powerful that it's gonna like increase my combat potential, because I tend to lean a bit more offensively in a way, I don't really see it. Also, you're rolling a dice, right? On a 3+, they have a chance to not do anything. Okay, that's great. Unless it's like the 1 in 100 chance where that's gonna really make or break your whole game for that turn. I just don't see the play in it. I haven't played it myself, but it's not enticing at all for me to take. And then the last one, the King of Kings, Cloak of Mist and Shadows. So you're going to ignore modifiers, positive and negative, to save rolls for attacks to target the bearer. This is by far the most powerful of the artifacts, in my opinion. It's definitely like the cookie cutter build where you take your Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon, you give it Doom Minions, and you slap the Cloak of Mist and Shadows on it. And now you have a wizard hero who is also a monster, who is ethereal at 3 up, who can heal up to 6 wounds every combat phase, and who's hitting your infantry on a 2+. It's a no-brainer. It really is. And this definitely adds to the survivability. It adds to your offensive and defensive potential of the whole army. It's just a great artifact. So to ranking the artifacts of power, definitely Cloak of Mist and Shadow is number 1. Amulet of Screams is a good number 2. And the Orb of Enchantment is number 3. Okay, next I want to talk about essential units and potential loadouts. So these are going to be some of the models that I feel are going to be essential for any competitive list, or just units in general that I think are pretty good in the bloodline. First and foremost is Neferata, the Mortarch of Blood. Now Nephi is an absolute auto-include in Legion of Blood, in my opinion. First and foremost, she counts as a War Master, so we treat her as a general along with our chosen general, which is awesome because they can issue commands at a higher range. And if your chosen general is ever slain, now you can generate command point in your heroic actions on a 2+ rather than a 4+ because you still get that benefit. Additionally, Nephi is a 2-cast wizard, so she's able to cast and dispel 2 spells. And because she is a Mortarch, she has access to both the lore of vampires and the lore of death mages. And this is really, really important because she gets access to Waste Away, which is one of the best spells in the entire Soulblight Gravelords book. So Waste Away has a range of 18, and if successfully cast, the chosen unit will have -1 to wound and -1 to damage. Additionally, if you're able to cast it on a 9 or higher, unmodified, so not counting the built-in +1, right? If she's more than 3 inches away from enemy units and not counting any primal dice, then you get to select 2 units to apply the debuff to, which is really, really good to say the least. So Waste Away tends to be an auto-include whenever you take Nephi as her chosen spell. Next, we look at her abilities, and her War Scroll spell is Dark Mist. So you select a unit, and they are going to become ethereal. So they're going to ignore positive and negative save modifiers. Again, really strong spell, especially when it's cast on a 6 up. So really easy to get off. I love casting this on Nephi herself, and having Nephi and a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon both on an ethereal 3 up, healing up to 6 wounds because of the hunger. Just makes them absolute powerhouses, and they're able to, deal a lot of damage and cut through a lot of units that people don't normally expect, or just to survive what your opponent might, think was a turn where they could, remove Nephi or the Vampire Lord from the table. So really, really strong. Remember, you don't have to target Nephi with Dark Mist. You could target something else, like if you bring a Vangorian Lord, or if you bring a reinforced block of Blood Knights. So if you bring 10 Blood Knights, now you have 30 wounds on an ethereal 3-up save, which can also be really, really difficult to move. Looking at some of her War Scroll abilities, she has the Dagger of Jet. If you're able to inflict a wound onto an enemy hero with her Akhmet Har weapon profile, so that's going to be 6 attacks, because you're getting the +1 attack from the bloodline here. On 3s, -2, 1 damage each, right? So if at least one wound is allocated and not negated to that hero, the chosen, at the end of the phase, you roll a dice, and on a 5 up, that enemy hero is slain. So you do have the ability to auto-slay key enemy models, especially if they're large models. You're able to allocate 1 wound to a Mega Gargant or to Catacross or something similar, and you roll that 5 up, then it doesn't matter how much they have left over, they're auto-slain and removed from the game. So really, really great. If not for the likelihood of slaying a hero, I find it great because it puts fear into your opponent's mind. It sort of makes them second guess, oh, do I want to charge into Nephi and potentially, have my key hero or key unit deleted on a dice roll. And most people would be like, oh, no, it's perfectly fine. They don't think twice about it until it happens. And I've been at a store tournament where I very easily, turn 1 combat, been able to roll a 5 up against a Catacross and just removed it from the game. And that was devastating for my opponent, obviously, but it can happen, and then just the fact that it can happen makes your opponent sort of play a little bit differently than they normally would be. So really good on that. The other thing she has is Twilight's Allure, and that's a -1 to hit aura. So all enemy units wholly within 12 inches of Nephi are going to receive a -1 to hit. Now this is awesome because, you know, it's going to provide a little bit of a defense bubble around Neffy and all her allies, as long as you're moving them together. It also helps negate, you know, key all-out attacks from your opponents and things like that. So really, really great to have. And then lastly is the Mortarch of Blood ability. So this is at the end of your setup, right before start your hero phase. You can basically select Neffy and up to 3 other units, and then move them around and redeploy them. So kind of illustrate what that looks like here a little bit, right? So imagine you sort of set up like this, where you have Neffy and some Black Knights to the left side of the board, and you have some zombies, skeletons, a Vampire Lord, Zombie Dragon, and a Vampire Lord over to the right. And you know, decide that, okay, I want to put more pressure on the left side of the table, you know, try to claim that objective, and then the objective next to it for whatever reason. Well, thanks to Neffy's Mortarch of Blood ability, you can go ahead and shift, okay, or redeploy your army, right, to sort of suit that. Now again, this is more of like a mind game situation for your opponent. So if you let them know, like, hey, you know, I can do this, as you guys are sort of going over your army and going over your list, especially if they don't know how your army works, and you can start setting up in a way where maybe you know, pile some key things on one side of the table, and they sort of deploy to counter that, and then you sort of pick that up and then shift it. You know, now their army is sort of out of position, and you can really capitalize on things like that. So really, really great in that sense, where it gives you a little bit more of a tactical mindset and ability as you're setting up your army right from the beginning. Okay, so the next key unit, the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. It's one of my favorite models. As any Soulblight, I'll always be unhappy about how much this guy costs. It seems that every book and every update that comes out, his points just keep getting higher and higher and higher. But anyways, this is generally your chosen general. Want to go for the Death Lance, command trait, do minions, and the artifact Cloak of Mist and Shadow. So you're going to have a 16 wound wizard, you know, hero and a monster on an ethereal 3-up, and he's moving 14 inches on a given turn. So just really, really strong. For his 1-cast spell, normally I like to choose between Flaming Weapon or Vile Transference. I have been favoring Vile Transference because a lot of large heroes and monsters and stuff in my local meta, so I have an opportunity to roll multiple dice and then capitalize on dealing mortal wounds and then healing in response to that. As far as abilities go, it has Terror, which is going to deny Inspiring Presence to units within 3 inches of it, which is awesome. Really great model. Does a lot of work in the army, so really, really great include. And then my last, what I would say be like an auto include, right, in an army would be a just foot Vampire Lord, just your regular Vampire Lord hero. They make a great support hero and Antorian Locust for the current season. It's going to benefit from that +1 to casting a lot, because you're more than likely going to keep him outside of combat range. This is your Hoarfrost or Blizzard Wizard, really what you're looking to cast with this guy. I personally take a lot of Hoarfrost on this because I couple him with a block of skeletons, and I'll talk about that in a second here. But one of my favorite things about him is the Crimson Feast. For nothing, it's not a command ability, it just happens at the start of the combat phase. You can select a summonable unit within 12 inches of the Vampire Lord, and you can add +1 to their melee attack profile. Fantastic, right? So now if you have a 20 block of Graveguard who get 2 attacks apiece, right, instead of dealing 40 attacks, you're dealing 60 attacks. If we're talking about a 20 block of skeletons, instead of dealing 20 attacks, now you're dealing 40 attacks. So really great at just, you know, increasing your attack profile on those infantry units, and then really starting to make a dent and sort of chip at your enemy's army. Other notable units, I'm going to start out with one of my favorite units this season, and that's going to be skeletons. I know zombies have gotten a lot of play. I know zombies are, even at 150, a great unit still for what they do. But I've just become such a huge fan of Death Rattle Skeletons this season. They make a fantastic anvil, so if you take a block of 20 to 30 skeletons, whatever they engage in combat with is going to be there a while. They're going to really have to commit to wiping out those skeletons, and what they're doing, so you're, you know, on the other side of the board, taking objectives, clearing away key units, really forcing them to make poor plays. But they're just fantastic. If you don't know, the basic rules for skeletons is the number of skeletons that are slain right from the unit at the start of the combat phase. It doesn't matter if it's your combat phase or your opponent's combat phase. You roll dice equal to the slain number of slain models, and on a 4-up, they sort of rise back up again. It's just absolutely incredible. Really, really good. Especially if, you know, your army has heavy shooting. Oh, they shoot half your skeletal unit, so you have 20, and they shoot 10 off the board right during their shooting phase. Start a combat phase, you're like, right, roll 10 dice. You know, you get 5 4-ups, and then 5 of those skeletons just stand back up, ready to fight, ready to keep pressing on. And then at the start of your hero phase, you get to add 3 or 4 depending on how close you are to a grave site back to the unit. So really, really good. One of my favorite units, especially because they make obtaining certain battle tactics really easy. So really big fan on there when it comes to the point scoring. Another thing that I really like about these guys is that if you're able to couple them with a Vampire Lord on foot and you're able to get Hoarfrost off on them, they make a really good Hoarfrost hammer. This is obviously like a bread and butter thing, right? You get 20 to 30 skeletons next to your Vampire Lord on foot. You cast Hoarfrost on them with some primal dice and the +1 casting bonus. You roll a 2 or 3 on that D3, and now they're sitting at force 3s -2 or -3, dealing 1 damage apiece, right? It's all out attack, so it's 3 3s -2 or -3, 1 damage apiece. You're like, oh, it's just 1 damage apiece. Yeah, but if you have, 20, 30 skeletons all potentially fighting, you're going to deal a decent number of wounds to whatever's you're attacking, and they're going to be stuck in combat with you for a while as you slowly chip away at them, and you just keep returning bodies, constantly. So really, really great. One of my favorite units in the game, and I think the models just look fantastic. Next is Graveguard. Graveguard's a bread and butter staple in Soulblight overall. It is the definition of glass cannon. It is your one of your strongest, if not the strongest, hammer that you have when it comes to just basic damage output. In the past, I have always auto-included Graveguard in my army. Lately, I've been sort of putting them on the shelf for a little bit and testing other things, maybe bring another unit of 20 skeletons or 30 skeletons rather than the Graveguard, just so I can play more of the recursion and bog down game with my opponents. Great thing with Graveguard against just the damage output that they have. They just suffer from, 9 times out of 10, you put them in the grave, you pop them up at some point during turn 2 or turn 3, try to make that 9-inch charge, and you fail, fall flat on your face, and your opponent laughs as they redirect some units and then start wiping out, your Graveguard before you can even get into combat and really do something with them. They definitely have play, and they're still a really, really strong hammer. Next, we have Black Knights. I'm a big fan of Black Knights. They're a great fast screen, so they move 12 inches, and they deal mortals on the charge. So the way that they work is whenever they charge a unit, you're going to roll 2 dice per models in your unit. So if you have a normal unit of 5, you roll 10 dice, and on a 5-up, the unit you charge takes a mortal wound. Really, really good, especially, again, if you're trying to chip down one of those like low 5 or 6 wound heroes, or if you're trying to block off a key hero or key unit and sort of chip at them a little bit before your Vampire Lord or, your Graveguard or something comes in and finishes off the job. So really, really great. I also like the fact that they're easy to kill, which might sound counterintuitive, but it works for one of our battle tactics as well. So easy to kill, that means they die early, they start working towards grand strategy, they start working towards battle tactics. So just a great unit overall, in my opinion. Okay, other notable units, and again, these are ones that I've played around with. They're not necessarily too consistent in my list, but I have sort of put them in here and there just to test them out in Legion of Blood. Deadwalker Zombies, everybody's least favorite Soulblight unit. They're a great anvil, and they're able to kick back mortals whenever they're slain, so really good on that. And then Direwolves is another fast screen that you can sort of put in if you don't have Black Knights or you don't like Black Knights. Not great combat pieces, right? None of our sort of like infantry besides, like summonable infantry besides Graveguard tend to be really strong combat pieces by themselves. The skeletons would really falter if the Vampire Lord is sort of removed from the picture, or they don't have Hoarfrost. They're not going to be as effective as a combat piece, but great anvil piece still. But still a lot of play and variability with these guys. Okay, then I want to take a quick moment and sort of discuss list building. So a lot of times when people ask me like, oh, how do you build a list, or how, what are some great lists for this bloodline, or what do you think? It always comes back to 2 things. So when I look at list building, one is going to be, well, what's your goal? Are you going for casual? And if so, then just build for fun. Build what you think looks cool. Build what you like the rule set for. Build what sort of makes you happy putting on the table and playing. If you're looking for something that is going to help you with your local store tournament, like a monthly tournament or a GT, right, and you're building competitive, then my mindset is, well, you want to build for points. You want to take a look at the current GHB season. You want to look at the battle tactics and grand strategies offered. Then you want to look at your book, and then look at the battle tactics and grand strategies offered in your book, and then build an army that's going to allow you to maximize the number of points, you know, that you can earn each round. So try to eliminate as much chance or randomness from your potential point earnings so you can maximize your score, because that's how you win the game, right? It's a point scoring game at the end of the day. I generally try to do something where I meld the two, or I have units that I think are fun or I enjoy playing, right? But are also going to be competitive to some degree. I don't fully go full dive into the competitive list, right? I think early book formation had, you know, most recently the most competitive Soulblight list was running 100 plus something zombies and Virkos and things like that. It doesn't compel to me, right? Even though I could probably win a lot of games with it, it doesn't seem fun for me, and I don't necessarily think it would be very fun for my opponent to watch me push 140, 160 zombies across the table and just sit on an objective and go, okay, good luck. So I try to sort of meld the two a little bit, but I still sort of lean right into, if I'm going to my monthly tournament or if I want to try for a GT, I want to build for points. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's look at our grand strategies, right? So the current GHB season grand strategies are okay, but they're not great for our army in the way that Soulblight plays. And we actually have two great grand strategies that are fairly easy to achieve and can guarantee us 3 points at the end of the game. One being Lust for Domination. So when the battle ends, you complete this grand strategy if you control more grave sites than your opponent. Control of grave sites is determined in the same way as control for objectives. However, unlike objectives, grave sites do not remain under your control if there are no longer any friendly models contesting them. Now, this is easy to accomplish because you can place up to 4 grave sites. You don't have to place up to 4. You can place 2 in your territory, and you can place 1 outside anywhere on the board. So you can place 3 grave sites, and you just have to end up controlling 2 of them. It's also great because when you bring back summonable models, right, you have to bring them back around a grave site. So you're already contesting that grave site when you bring your models back. So really, really good, easy, you know, battle or grand strategy for us to accomplish. The other one is Empire of Corpses. When the battle ends, you complete this grand strategy if you replace 3 or more friendly summonable units that were destroyed during the battle. So this ties in with one of the core Soulblight army traits, right? That when a summonable unit is slain on your movement phase and on your opponent's movement phase, you roll a dice, and on a 4-up, you get to return a replacement unit with half the models and then put them on the board. So this is one of the reasons why I really like Black Knights, right? Black Knights are on a 5-up save. They're 10 wounds for the whole unit. I can go ahead and very early push these guys forward, gain control of an early objective. I don't really care if my opponent, you know, wipes them off the board turn 1. I'm actually kind of hoping for it. Same thing, same strategy with Fellbats, right? You can sort of yeet those guys forward and then see how they die. And that's great, because if that happens, then you can start making rolls for your Empire of Corpses early. Really start working towards your grand strategy. Okay, and your opponent can't deny that. The only way they can deny that is by not killing your units, and that's not going to really work for them. So definitely would lean towards these two when selecting a grand strategy. I personally just always pick Empire of Corpses, right? There is a small possibility that you do fail the grand strategy. I've yet to fail it. But even then, it just adds a little bit more excitement to the game, right? Are you going to get it or you're not? It kind of builds on it. The next thing is to look at is your battle tactics. It's important to know that not all battle tactics are built the same, and not all battle tactics that excuse me, that are included are going to work the same in every battle plan. So some of these are awesome in some battle plans, and some of these suck on some battle plans, depending on the territories and where your deployment zones are and things like that. So for our army, we have 6 battle tactics. We have Callous Overlord, Cursed on Life, The Grasping Dead, The Choicest Vintage, Expand the Grave Empires, and Endless Nightmare. I honestly don't want to spend too much time reading these. You guys can obviously look at the screen and look at them, but I do want to tackle the ones that I think are the most easily achieved across any or most of the battle plans here. For me, right, these are the ones that I'm 8 times or 9 times out of 10 are able to very easily score and get points from. We're going to start with Cursed on Life. So you complete this tactic if any wounds allocated to your general or to 2 other friendly vampire units are healed using the Hunger ability during this turn. This is awesome. Remember, you take Neferata, you take the Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon. They both count as a general. So all you have to do is heal with Nephi or your Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon. If that's not the case, then you can go ahead and heal with Nephi, the Vampire Lord Zombie Dragon, your Foot Vampire Lord, right? It's just something that is really, really easy to achieve, and definitely at any point in the game, if you're looking for a free 2 points, right? If you find yourself in, turn 3 or turn 4, and you're like, oh, well, I've already intimidated the invaders, I've already done this and that, then I got Nephi with 4 wounds down, I got my Vampire Lord Summer Dragon with 10 wounds down. I'm going to charge them into an easy hero or an easy infantry unit, heal up, and there's my battle tactic. So it doesn't even say that you have to heal to full, you just have to heal, which is awesome. The next one is the Grasping Dead. Pick one friendly summonable unit within 3 inches of any enemy units. You complete this battle tactic if that unit is within 3 inches of an enemy unit at the end of this turn. Basically, you just need to pick a unit that's, in combat with something, or close enough to combat with something, and they just have to sort of be staring each other off at the end of the combat phase. If you're picking your skeletons, more than likely that's going to happen because of the recursion at the start of the combat phase. Again, they're not hitting super hard. So if they're locked in with a large enemy hero monster, or if they're locked in with another, block of infantry of your opponent, and they're just kind of whittling each other down, there you go. There's your battle tactic, free 2 points coming at you. The other one is Endless Nightmare. Pick one friendly Soulblight Gravelord summonable unit on the battlefield. You complete this tactic if 6 or more slain models are returned to that unit during this turn. Now, this is going to work exceptionally well with your skeletons. This is pretty much an auto completion if you have a block of 20 or 30 skeletons and you've gone through one phase of combat. So the way that I try to do it is I set it up so I have my Vampire Lord always sort of babysitting my block of skeletons, and I deploy my grave sites in a place where I know that I'm going to be fighting my opponent, and I'm going to find my unit of skeletons wholly within that grave site 12-inch bubble. At the start of my hero phase, I can return up to 4 of my models to that unit. I get 3 because of the Soulblight invocations, and then I get to return an extra model because I'm wholly within 12 of a gravesite. And now all I need to do is roll 2 4-ups when I roll for the recursion for the skeletons on my combat phase. It hasn't failed me yet. It's honestly one of the easiest battle tactics to accomplish. So when we're looking at that, really, really simple to do. Expand the Grave Empires is really easy to accomplish as well, if the battle plan allows you to do it. The reason I haven't highlighted yellow is because some battle plans won't have any objectives wholly outside your deployment zone. It'll sort of be split between you and your opponents. So then you'll never be able to complete that battle tactic. The other one, the Callous Overlord, which I also personally like, didn't include it because sometimes people don't bring easy to kill summonable units, right? Maybe you're running a block of 40 zombies and 30 skeletons or something like that, and that can be a little trickier for your opponent to kill and wipe in one combat phase. Things like 5 Black Knights or maybe 10 Dire Wolves, if you're really charging them into something that has a high output, can be a lot easier to kill and then get you Callous Overlord. But if I had to sort of choose, my top 3 would be Curse on Life, Grasping Dead, and Endless Nightmare, at least for the way that I build my list. Callous Overlord is definitely a close follow-up. And then Expand the Great Empires if you have a battle plan that has objectives, something like the Pulsing battle plan. I forgot exactly what it's called. But we have the 4 objectives down the center, and the deployment zone is, I believe, 11 inches from the board edge for you and your opponent. Then Expand the Grave Empires is an easy one that you can do immediately. And you can even double back that with Intimidate the Invaders, and now you have 2 battle tactics right in your pocket and just ready to go. So really, really easy. Choices Vintage also very situational, but if you're able to charge Nephi or or your Vampire Lord Zombie Dragon into their small 5 or 6 wound heroes, that's easy battle tactic to accomplish as well. So not very difficult at all. Great battle tactics for Soulblight. Kind of brain dead, really, if you think about it. Okay, next I want to talk about the current GHB season battle tactics. So this is the General's Handbook 2023-2024, the Endorian, Locust, Wizard battle tactics if you're sort of watching this in the future. You have, what is that, 8 battle tactics in total. Some of them are great, some of them are not. Again, I'm not going to read all of them. I'll just sort of highlight the ones that I've ended up using the most and I think are fairly easy to accomplish for our army. Top 2 that I feel are the best ones are going to be Intimidate the Invaders. So you complete this battle tactic at the end of your turn. If there are more friendly units wholly outside your territory than there are friendly units within your territory. Again, great if you have grave sites, you can just pop up things right already outside of your territory. So it doesn't require a lot there, especially if your opponent's trying to sort of block you in and prevent you from getting that. So easy one to accomplish. It's pretty much everybody's go-to at some point or another in the game. Then you have Surround and Destroy. Pick 3 different friendly units on the battlefield. You complete this battle tactic at the end of your turn if each of those units is wholly within 6 inches of a different battlefield edge, and 2 or more of those units are wholly outside your territory. This one's great because you can set it up a turn in advance by summoning things from a gravesite, right? You put a gravesite back near some battlefield edges. You can bring your units out, and then the subsequent turn you can go ahead and declare this battle tactic, and there you go. You've got it done. So nothing too difficult or crazy on that one. Magical Dominance can be good, especially because you have that +1 to casting and your primal magic dice. It just requires a little bit of planning and depends on which what you're facing, right? If you're facing that Stormcast auto unbind wizard, then obviously you're never going to get that. If you're facing Seraphon, where they can unbind board wide, then that's going to be an issue as well. But you can always plan to sort of have your little Vampire Lord foot hero more, outside of 30 of your opponent cast something simple like a Mystic Shield or whatever, and then claim that that battle tactic as well. Led to the Maelstrom can also be fairly good, and it's situational a lot of the times, but you have to charge 2 friendly units. At least one has to be a battle line and one has to be a hero, and at the end of the turn either that battle line or hero have to be within 3 inches of an enemy unit. Most of the time, if your Vampire Lord is charging into something, it might end up killing it, but if you're charging skeletons into something, like I mentioned before, they do have some output, nothing too crazy, so they'll start chipping away at whatever it is you're attacking, and then with their great recursion, they'll still be there at the end of the fight, so easy enough for you to claim that battle tactic as well. So this is kind of my general idea when I build lists, right? I sort of look at these things and I go, okay, I can easily accomplish this with this unit, this with this one, and this with this one. So I sort of start planning in my head, right, how I can maximize my points, and I encourage you to sort of like do the same. It doesn't require a whole lot of hard thinking. It just requires a little bit of time, commitment more than anything else to really figure it out. Okay, so then with this, we can look at some lists. And again, these are just some of my personal opinions. There's a lot of list variability and ways you can build this, but these are some of the ones that if you're looking for, okay, how can I put something together and I need a bit of help, this can kind of guide you and get you going on your way. First list we'll look at is what I like to call just a standard list. You notice on the left hand side is the list, on the right hand side is just a couple notes on the list. So grand strategy would be Empire of Corpses or Lust for Domination, whatever you prefer. It'll include Neferata with Waste Away as her spell. Your Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon would be your general. He'll have Deathlance, Doom Minions as a command trait. You can pick between Vile Transference or Flaming Weapon as your spell of choice, whatever you like best. And then your artifact is the Cloak of Mist and Shadows. Then you'll include a Vampire Lord with Hoarfrost, a reinforced unit of Death Rattle Skeletons, so that'll be double reinforced, so that'll be 30 Death Rattle Skeletons. You can either bring a unit of Direwolves or Zombies to complete your battle line choice, and then a reinforced unit of Graveguard, and that brings you to 1990 points. Really simple, sort of cookie cutter, bread and butter build. Does really well, right? Easily able to complete the battle tactics listed on the right hand side there. So if you're looking to get started and just sort of go with like a standard loadout, this is definitely where I would point you to. Another list would be, well, what if I want to include a Blizzard Wizard, right? I want to have Blizzard on my army. How can I go about doing that? So the first part of the list on the left-hand side is pretty much the same. Neferata, Vampire Lord, and Zombie Dragon, the Vampire Lord. But now we include a Necromancer, And we're going to go ahead and give that Necromancer the Merciless Blizzard spell. Here, I'm again including 30 Death Rattle Skeletons, so a double reinforced unit. A unit of Dead Walker Zombies. This is going to serve as sort of like a bodyguard for my Necromancer. And then 2 other units of either zombies or direwolves. I would personally go with 2 units of direwolves, again, just to work as fast screens, objective grabbers, help sort of zone out and provide a little bit of coverage for Nephi and the Vampire Lord, right, as they eat like a Unleash Hell or something like that. And their movement just works better than having other zombies. The 20 block of zombies is there, so your Necromancer can sort of move forward, set an objective, pass off wounds to them, and eventually get off a big blizzard. And if he blows himself up, great. Nobody cares. He did what he was supposed to do. So here is 1920 to 1960 points, depending on if you take like the Endless spell, the Pendulum, or Gravetide. Either one. So either one of those Endless spells would be really good. So this is called the Death Rattle Dream. I actually put this together after reading a comment on one of my videos where somebody mentioned that they really liked their skeletal units and they wanted to build a skeletal army. They kind of asked for my take on it or advice and things like that. And I thought, why not include something that if I were building a sort of skeletal army, how would I go about it? So again, Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon, White King on Skeletal Steed, Vampire Lord, and Necromancer. I think I might have omitted Nephi on this list, but it's basically just focusing on 2 reinforced units of Death Rattle Skeletons, a reinforced unit of Black Knights, and then a reinforced unit of Graveguard. The gimmick here being that the White King on Skeletal Steed is going to go ahead and charge with that reinforced unit of Black Knights. And if he's able to get that charge off and they get that charge off, you roll 20 dice, and on a 4-up, they deal a mortal wound. Personal experience, I have charged this exact same thing into Techless and done a lot of damage into Techless. People underestimate, and then you end up spiking the roll, and next thing you know, they're regretting their choices. So this is kind of a fun meme list if you think about it. I would probably run it as a 2-drop, or if I run the additional artifact, I would give the Amulet of Screams to the White King on Skeletal Seed, so that way he can pop off from a gravesite and then start punishing wizards for casting in that area. Also, if he dies and you bring him back, he still has the artifact with him, so pretty funny in that sense as well. Monster Mash. Okay, so this is a list that I've actually been playing a little bit on and off at my local store. Just playing with the idea of bringing more heavy monster heroes and then seeing how they do. So we have Neferata, the Vampire Zombie Dragon, standard loadout there. And then I'm bringing a Vengorian Lord. I'm giving it Spirit Gale. I know I've talked a lot of shit about Spirit Gale in the past. I'm still talking shit about it now. But I want to test it out and then really see how it's going. And then a Vampire Lord. Full disclosure, most of the time I end up casting like a Mystic Shield, or I try to summon the Aether Void Pendulum or the Suffocating Gravetide instead of casting Spirit Gale. I have cast it a few times just in order to finish off like one of those pesky, little foot heroes that my opponent has, or they maybe just have like 1 mortal wound left, or they have 2 mortal wounds left, and I want to make sure that a stomp, finishes the job. So I'll cast Spirit Gale in those niche instances, but it just feels like it feels like a I don't know. It's not the same. It feels kind of empty. But regardless, I have 1 reinforced unit of Death Rattle Skeletons. Again, that's going to be my 20 skeletons. They're going to be babysat by my Vampire Lord. It's going to help me achieve Endless Nightmare. It's going to help me achieve like the Grasping Dead. Right, battle tactics there. I have 1 10-man unit of Death Rattle Skeletons. Those are usually the ones that I'll deep strike or have them set an objective off to the side of the board and just be annoying for my opponent. They're like, oh, I gotta go deal with these 10 skeletons now. Then I have 2 units of Black Knights. These work as my screens and fast objective grabbers. They're great for Callous Overlord. The one thing I will say about this list, right, is that it doesn't do great at all into heavy shooting, but the combination of having the Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon, who's ethereal, having Nephi either cast Dark Mist on herself or the Vengorian Lord, and then having the Vengorian Lord giving that -1 to rend to the opponent can be devastating. If you are able to push the Vengorian Lord and the Vampire Lord together into a single spot and they're kind of bouncing off each other and helping each other there, can be really, really troublesome for your opponent to deal with. And then this list is pretty much the previous list, but this is the most recent list that I took to my monthly store tournament. I ended up getting 2 wins, 1 loss with this list. But the idea is I've replaced the Vengorian Lord with a 2nd foot Vampire Lord and 2 standard units of Deadwalker zombies. I've also dropped the Aether Void Pendulum and just kept the Gravetide in case I go against like a Skaven Horde or something like that. I enjoyed playing this list. I will say that Deadwalker zombies did what they were meant to do, which is just die and then soften up other units so that my Vampire Lord Zombie Dragon could finish them off. Again, you'll notice I took Spirit Gale and that foot Vampire Lord. This was mostly just because of the mission plans that we were playing on. We were playing the ones like Towers in the Tundra, and he basically just sat Garrison within that building, getting a +2 cast to his Spirit Gale. So it was just being annoying every round, chipping away 1 mortal wound on the little foot heroes of my opponent. And that's specifically why I gave him that spell. Otherwise, I would have given him a Merciless Blizzard, right? Just to help with that +1 casting and sacrifice him at some point in the game. Just run up, kill something, and then, die. But regardless, really enjoyed it. I played it as a 2-drop, and you can see the breakdown there. The one game that I did lose, I just have no experience playing against this list. It was the Heavy Fusilier Cities of Sigmar list, and that game ended basically the moment models were put on the table. Just completely, the battle plan wasn't in my favor, and then the shooting was just highly oppressive. But that's the way the game goes. Regardless, the other 2 games were really great, and the list did really, really well in those games as well. This other list here. Wow, I wrote a lot of lists. Okay. This is for people who maybe don't have access to a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. I know right now, as the time of filming this, they're a little bit difficult to find. If you go to GW's store, they're out of stock, and there's none on Amazon, and maybe your local store has also run out because all the Flesh Eater Core players are picking them up to build their Terrorgeist and Zombie Dragons and things like that. So if you're able to pick up one of the newer battle boxes or just a Vengorian Lord, right, you can run Nephi the Vengorian Lord, a Vampire Lord, a Necromancer, and then a little bit more battle line units to compensate there. Still a great list. I have run something like this in the past where I kind of benched the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon before. You can even run double Vengorian Lord if you would like, but still will probably do fairly well, and you could definitely get the whole Legion of Blood feel with the list. Okay, so quick note on buying guide, and this is just some of the things that I would recommend if you're looking to get into the Legion of Blood specifically. First and foremost, Neferata. In my opinion, it's just an auto-include in every list. So your list already starts down 410 points. She just does so much, and is people who have played against her, the second time you play them will definitely have more respect and will put a target on Nephi's back. If it's your first time playing people who haven't played Soulblight or don't play a lot against Soulblight and haven't really had the chance to go against Nephi on the table, they might really focus on things like your Vengorian Lord or your Vampire and Zombie Dragon. And they underestimate Nephi until she starts doing work. And she does a lot of work, and oftentimes I find that my Vampire and Zombie Dragon is dead by turn 3, but Nephi makes it all the way through the game at turn 5, just because she can be so difficult to kill, and she does deal more damage than people think she does. So, great model. The next thing I would recommend would be, if you're able to snag it soon, before it runs out, is the Vengorian Court Christmas box or the Battle Force box. Just because it brings you your Vengorian Lord, which you can build as Lakovai, that can transition over to Avangori if it ever becomes viable. You get 20 Death Rattle Skeletons, 10 Direwolves, 5 Blood Knights, and 3 Fellbats. Blood Knights aren't getting a whole lot of play right now just because they're overcosted and they're not really pulling their weight in that sense. But the rest of the models can be very useful in any list, especially Legion of Blood list. And then I would follow up with the regular Vanguard Soulblight box, so you can have your Vampire Lord, more skeletons, and then if you're able to pick up the old Star Collecting box, so you can get a hold of those Grave Guards and Black Knights, that could be really good for you as well. Anyways, guys, this is the end of the video. I want to thank you so much for sticking around. Please make sure you like and subscribe if you're not subscribed to the channel. It really does help me a ton. And then comment down below. Let me know what you thought of the video. Let me know if you have any suggestions or any lists or units that you prefer. And always happy to read the comments and reply. So that's it for this one, and I'll catch you in the next one.